My neighbors are literally like angrily screaming and fighting with each other really, really loud. And it's kind of scary. It sounds like violent, and I don't know whether I should call the police. And it just makes my skin crawl! Oh my god, I seriously can't handle public transportation in this city. So I'm fully aware that this is going to sound like really entitled and privileged, but I literally cannot stand public transportation, especially in a big city, coming from somebody that's super anxious and claustrophobic. Okay, so I was on the bus from North Van to downtown, and I look up and this guy at the front of the bus is staring at me, and so I turn away, and then I look up out of my peripheral vision maybe 5 minutes later, and he's still staring directly at me from the front of the bus. So I look out the window and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to look out the window for the rest of this ride. He comes all the way to the back of the bus and stands literally in front of me and stares at me in my chair. I'm like, cool. But meanwhile, I'm sitting at the very back of the bus and another guy is literally laying on my shoulder trying to sleep. You might think that coming from a background of being on stage, being on film, being a YouTuber, that I would probably be used to people staring at me at this point, but there's a little bit of difference. When you're on stage, you're doing something rehearsed, you are there to perform for the audience, and I'm actually a huge introvert, believe it or not, so it's in my comfort zone to be behind the camera and to film within my own bubble. So being somebody that is super claustrophobic, I try to avoid all situations where people are touching me, rubbing up against me, invading my personal space. But I'm aware that having personal space is a privilege, and that when you live in a big city, especially a metropolitan city, you can't always have your own personal space, and being on the bus is kind of a time when people are just invading that personal space, and it just makes my skin crawl. When I was little, I was like the only kid in my entire class in elementary school that was bullied, and I was bullied by every single kid in the class. I had 0 friends. I was kidnapped from my home when I was 5 years old. I was physically abused by somebody that was extremely close to me, that I trusted growing up. And the only reason I'm telling you this is because when I was in elementary school, people would bump into me at the pencil sharpener, and they would run off to somebody else and touch their shoulder and be like, Jordan germs, no returns, like I was some kind of disease. And so people would intentionally start coming up to me, and they'd touch my shoulder just so they could run up to somebody else and be like, Jordan germs, no returns, like it was this fun game to them, like I was some contagious illness. And so to me, it's always given me this PTSD. And then when I moved to Vancouver, I was living my life happily for the first couple months, and then I was just sitting at a park one day after set. It wasn't even very late, and I was robbed by a group of people. And they threatened to harm me. They sprayed me down with bear spray. And when I was 18 years old, I was coming home from my friend Cody's house, and this creepy man tried to pull me into his truck. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But basically, all of these things have just made it so that I'm really not okay with being touched. And I'm a very huggy, loving, affectionate person, but I have to know you and be comfortable with that. And so when people are within my personal space and just invading my privacy or staring at me uncomfortably for long periods of time, it just makes me feel very anxious and very nervous and very uncomfortable. And all of these things coming together just makes me very, very uncomfortable with strangers or anybody touching me unless I give them that permission. So I guess I do have the privilege of living somewhere like Vancouver, and that's why I moved to North Vancouver, because it is even smaller and it's more residential. Whereas when I lived in Toronto, it was absolutely insane. There was no concept of personal space anywhere you went because it was so overpopulated, and I couldn't even imagine living outside of Canada in densely populated areas like India or Asia. I don't know how people handle it, and trust me, if you don't have claustrophobia, claustrophobia is real. Like, don't get me wrong, public transportation is absolutely amazing. I don't drive a car, I have my license, and I refuse to get a car and stuff like that just because public transportation is better for the community, it's better for our society, and it is better on the earth and the planet. It's better for global warming, and it is just better for our earth if we come together and use things like public transportation. And I'm fully aware of all of the benefits, and I'm not like saying that there's no benefits or public transportation is bad, but for me personally, having an anxiety disorder that involves claustrophobia, post-traumatic stress disorder, and anxiety is just too much sometimes. So please refrain from coming for me in the comments. I have a sense of self-awareness. I know that public transportation is a privilege, and I know that being able to drive or not take public transportation is an even greater privilege that most of the world doesn't have. But this was just something that I needed to vent and get off my chest, and hopefully then I can start dealing with it and recovering from it and not being so uncomfortable when people stare at me and not being so uncomfortable when people are invading my personal space. And I do believe that people shouldn't invade your personal space, but there are times like being on the bus or being in a giant crowd where people can't help it. It's not to harm you. They have no bad intentions, but it is extremely uncomfortable. If any of you guys can totally relate to that, definitely let me know in the comments. Don't be afraid to chime in and share your opinion. If you think that I'm a totally entitled spoiled brat, that's a valid opinion too. Let me know in the comments. Just try and keep it as respectful as possible. And if you have any constructive criticism or help and advice for me, definitely let me know as well. So I'm home now, and I'm literally like having anxiety editing this vlog because I feel like people are going to take this the wrong way and just like hate me for this video, but like I felt like it's coming from an honest place, and it just wouldn't be honest of me not to share my honest opinions about this. And I think that some people that deal with anxiety and claustrophobia and post-traumatic stress can relate to this and understand that anxiety manifests in all sorts of ways, from being irritated to being nervous to being scared, feeling sick, all different kinds of things. Wanting to pass out, not wanting to pass out, but like feeling like you're going to pass out, like for me right now. But yeah, that is it for this video. So I guess as always, make sure to be weird, be wild, and stay sparkly, even if that's hard to do sometimes. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye.